I would love to welcome Dr. Jennie Grammer up, and your mom's an educator, right? Yes, and she is also like one of the most talented people I know in this world. Like, you want to get a website up, she can do it. You want a graphic design, she can do it. So
That's very kind. You're very kind. You can decide if you agree with that when you see these slides. I'm going to go ahead. I'm actually going to stand here, probably. So I think everything has been set up so well by everybody who came before me, so I don't need to elaborate too much more. But I wanted to start by describing to you a little bit about the foundation and the way we're thinking about the connection between research, practice, and policy. And today, some of our orientation to the day started with a focus on research. And so I'm going to guide us through how we think about neuroscience as it fits, but also really why we have to embed kids' development in context to even understand what's happening with the brain. So we believe at the collaborative that all students have value and promise. I know everybody in this room is oriented probably to that same idea. But we also know from decades of work in developmental psychology, cognitive neuroscience, educational research, the differences in how students learn are the norm rather than the exception, right? And if you've been in a classroom and you've taught kids, you look around in front of you and you know that even what kids bring day to day can vary, right? How they start in the morning and where their head is at when they come in the door can vary. But also their skills and development trajectories vary pretty considerably. Yeah? This one? Yes. Okay. I tend to get too close, so anyway. Okay. So I am a developmental cognitive neuroscientist and developmental psychologist by training, and you see neuroscience in our title, and I wanted to kind of ground us there for a second, because when we're thinking about diverse learners, we're often thinking about something that is in or related to children's brain development, maybe factors that are heritable. A lot of the work I do involves students with ADHD, so we think of ADHD as being something that's heritable, and it might be related to differences in your brain and how your brain is engaging in the world. Oftentimes when we're thinking about neuroscience, we're thinking about learning and cognition. But as was mentioned earlier, we're actually thinking about all the different pieces that are related to what happens with kids in the classroom. So it's both about academics and cognitive development, but we're also really interested in social-emotional development, behavioral mental health, and that's what we're going to see reflected in AREA, our learning management system that we'll get to in a second. But as somebody who studies brain development in the context of school, one of the things that's really great is that school periods are associated with pretty exciting changes in the brain. So the transition to school is a great window of development. Middle adolescence is another great window of development. So we know that during the time that kids are going from PK through 16 and beyond, we're seeing these great changes in what's going on in their brain. And I want to just give us a little nuance to that. It becomes relevant in a second, I promise. So in infancy, we have this great population and propagation of neurons, right? There's all this growing, and a lot of times we talk about growing our brains. Brain development's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's not just about getting more is better. It's about increasing efficiency and connections of those neurons and efficiency of kind of how we're processing information in the world around us. So fewer but stronger connections with development. And so when we're talking about growing our brains, getting those muscles, kind of the same idea, but that refinement process. Now, as somebody who studies brain development, but in the context of school, the other thing that I think is really notable is that we know that just by going to school, entering kindergarten, going to first grade, changes kids' brains. So it's not an audacious statement to say that. We actually have data in my lab that shows that, particularly around executive function. But this is a really important point, right? It's the context and the changes that are happening in the environment that kids are in that are major drivers for their brain development and for their behavioral development. So the work that educators do every day is actually making that change happen. And so I just highlight this is a picture of a classic setup, rug time, circle time, everybody's sitting there. And if you think about the experience of an individual kid in a classroom like this, if I'm a student, for example, who has ADHD, this experience might be very different for me than a child who engages and has different attentional processes, right? One of the things that's really important for us to recognize is that what that teacher does and how the teacher perceives that student's behavior is also critical. So if I'm a student with ADHD and I'm sitting, actually this young woman in the middle is more often than not me, looking around, right? My teacher might take that moment and say, this student's misbehaving. right? Like she's not paying attention, she's not engaged. What's wrong, right? Alternatively, a different teacher might say, I know that this student is having challenges. Like maybe this setup isn't right. Maybe we've been sitting here for 30 minutes at rug time and we need to transition. Maybe other kids who look like they're paying attention actually are still also having difficulty in this moment, right? So teachers' understanding of kids' behavior, what's happening in their brains, what's happening in their bodies is really critical. And one of our goals is to share some of what we know from neuroscience, from developmental science to that end, to help make kind of these setups in classrooms more supportive of all the diverse learners that are in them. And so focusing on thinking about development, because I'm a developmental scientist, I just want to note that it's also not just at school entry, for example, it's across all of these years that we think brain and behavior are changing. And to reinforce this idea that it is a bidirectional interaction. So a student might enter a classroom with, again, ADHD, dyslexia, any number of other learning differences. That informs the experience they have and how educators respond to them, maybe interventions that we're giving them. But that in turn, those interventions and those experiences are shaping brain development over time. It's a continual process. So it was mentioned before, we've talked about diverse learners. Some people use the term neurodiversity. I want to just highlight exactly what students, or kind of the range of students that we're talking about here. In California, 13% of K-12 students have an identified disability. And I think Allison mentioned that's a number that's increasing despite declining enrollment. So we have a growing number of students with an identified disability, but we know also that an estimated 1 in 5 students experience difficulty with learning and attention. That could be related to dyslexia, dyscalculia, autism, et cetera. So we think that the number 13% is actually a larger group of kids. That equates to about 1.2 million of California's 6 million youth in schools. And for many more students, anxiety, depression, and trauma can also impact learning. Allison mentioned high schoolers talking about being bored and being tired. Those things matter. As somebody who studies attention and self-regulation, I can tell you for a fact that all of that impacts your ability to attend and regulate yourself. So partly as a result of this, 80% of schools reported changes in student behavior and social-emotional development in COVID, kind of following COVID-19 as surveyed in 2022. So when I talk with teachers, these are the types of questions that we get. How do we support kids who are having difficulty on these dimensions? We also know that addressing the needs of diverse learners in our classrooms is hard work. One of the ways that we're thinking about this in the collaborative is how we can support educators in that effort. In a survey that came out a couple of years ago, reported that 30% of teachers feel confident in their ability to support the diverse learners in their classroom. And I'm somebody who, as I look at it, I'm like, oh, 30%. And then I'm like, oh, wait, that's not the right version of that. So we're trying to find ways to make sure that a larger number of teachers feel like they have the knowledge and skills that they need to support all the diverse learners in their classrooms. We're doing this through a combination of research, practice, and policy, as Shireen highlighted so wonderfully this morning. So I don't have to go too much into this, but I want to highlight some of our specific programs and end us on this kind of work that we're doing around AREA, which is part of what we'll be talking about more today. Oh, before I do that, I am a developmental psychologist. If you've taken a developmental psych class, you'll recognize this. This is Bronfenbrenner, but we're just going to run through it really quickly because I want to show and reinforce the scale here. So most of the time when we're talking about kids in classrooms, we're only talking about teachers, right? We're like, how can teachers develop more skills and knowledge? But it's not just teachers. Everyone who interacts with students on a daily basis is impacting and playing an important role in ensuring their growth. Okay, so this is a much bigger circle of people. So just in the school, we might have our paraprofessionals, other members of the school staff. We have caregivers bringing kids to school every day, and peers. Peer interactions and inclusive spaces really matter, right? But it's more than that. So teachers do work that's impacted by school administrators. There are also other factors at play here. So those educators in the classroom come out of our teacher education programs. It was mentioned earlier how many of those educators here in LA are trained right here at Cal State Dominguez. So that multiplier effect is real. District decision makers also impact school administrators. Schools of ed are training our ed leaders. And so the circle grows. We have policymakers, federal, state, and local. I think we might feel a lot of proximity with the local policy, but state policy definitely is impacting us. And federal policy, as many of us are talking about right now, for our diverse learners matters for what we're able to do and the funding that we have. We also have all these other external things happening, economic factors, cultural strengths that are happening in communities, and things like systemic racism that are impacting the day-to-day experiences of our students. We've heard some of those themes resonant this morning already. And we also have the historical moment. So I mentioned before, coming out of COVID-19 pandemic, we're still experiencing challenges that educators are facing. This is difficult work because the world is always changing, right? It's a bit of a moving target. But the reason why I started with a little bit of a info about brain development is because one of our goals with the collaborative is to start streamlining and creating efficiencies in this work. So if we're all working on the same goal, how can we kind of create those connections in a way where our processes are aligned, we're working together, and we're actually more able or better able to focus our energy and effort on the students? So, with that in mind, we have this connection of research, practice, and policy. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we've been working to create a network of multipliers very briefly, how we're thinking about informing policy and our efforts there, and end on promoting learning. So we are here today, it was mentioned, because we're shared between the UC and the CSU. One of the wonderful things about the collaborative, and probably one of the most innovative things, is this kind of grouping of all of the experts we have in the UC and the CSU. Across both sets of campuses, we have amazing research going on, and we have preparation programs that are training, as I mentioned, our leaders and our teachers. And so bringing all of us together across the state, you'll see people in the afternoon, for example, in each of the sessions reflecting this kind of connection. And I think that this is a really important part of the work that we're engaged in. We're also connected with different entities in districts and states. And the goal here is really, again, to kind of make sure that we're optimizing and creating a better return on all of these amazing investments and all of the knowledge that we have here in the state. We also have been working on thinking about policy. So we have 3 main policy programs going on right now. Some of you might have been involved with the first one, which is the Senior Fellows Program. And this is a program that we launched this fall in group of participants, including legislators who are serving on the P16 education-related committees, philanthropic leaders, researchers from the UC and the CSU, all coming together to talk about critical issues related to policy. We also have our education policy internship, which is for undergrads, kind of thinking about developing awareness and knowledge in that group of young people who are going to be the next policy leaders potentially. And finally, we have a high school program called our Student Ambassador Program, which is in our second year. And these are high school students who are diverse learners or diverse learner allies. And they're doing research action projects to understand, how do we make changes in our schools for students that are around us every day? And their work is amazing. So hopefully we can highlight some of that for you all, because it's super, super cool. But in terms of promoting learning, this is where we're landing today, and this is where our learning tracks are focused for the afternoon. We have developed AREA, which is our new learning management system. AREA is for California, created by experts across the UC-CSU and in our statewide system. The term AREA, and it is pronounced AREA, reflects an array of all of our diverse learners, but also the array of all of the folks that are at the table to do the work to support them, right? So this is our new launch. So everybody can log in if you haven't already. When you do, you'll see something that looks like this. And this reflects our current content. We are going to continue to grow this content so that it can continue to meet the needs and interests of folks. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we're doing that now. But to start, AREA was created to be a trusted source to provide information that's vetted by top experts across the UC and CSU systems. It's designed to provide content that's aligned with state standards, so that's linked to the teacher performance expectations and the California Standards for Teaching Profession. So really creating content that you could use in your courses if you're teaching pre-service or you're teaching undergrads at any level, but also could be used to facilitate in-person professional learning opportunities that could be led by people within a district. We're also really trying to address the needs of California educators. Our goal is to provide practical, timely, evidence-based solutions to address the needs and challenges that are unique to educators here in our state. We've been interviewing teacher education faculty across the state. Some of you in this room have been a part of that. We've also been surveying in-service and pre-service teachers to better understand where are the areas and topics people want more information on, right? What type of information do they want? It turns out people want quick hit examples of practices, right? Things that they can use in the moment. And that's what we're working to design and develop. And then finally, as I mentioned or alluded to before, this goal of multiplying California's investments in children and youth through partnership. We have tons of amazing work out there, lots of great courses and trainings and modules. Trying to centralize them and put them in one place so we can make sure they're in the hands of everybody who needs them is one of our goals. So I mentioned whole child development at the beginning. This has come through in a theme in a couple of folks this morning. As we build out AREA, we're going to have more content on student learning and development in these different domains, but we're also focusing on educator practice in terms of skills and knowledge. So you'll see some things around educator well-being and practical skills that are more at the educator or paraprofessional level, and also information about how that relates to child development. And this is just an overview. I won't go into this too much. We can share this out. But the idea here is that we're offering a little something for everybody, but we're trying to create a shared language. So if you're in pre-service and you're learning about something, ideally, it'd be the same type of thing that you're hitting when you actually get into your placement. Or your administrator might be talking the same language as the terms that you're using. So we're trying to create content where everybody has a little piece of this and is getting on the same page about, for example, what we know about how to support students with dyslexia. Okay, so we have content for pre-service educators and teacher education faculty to be used in courses. We have work or content for in-service educators that can be used in different ways for asynchronous or in-person learning. And then finally, for policymakers and education leaders, we have brief, accessible versions of that so you can get up to date and see if you want to learn more. Okay. So with that in mind, as we move forward, we're going to continue to grow and have more and more content so we can hit all aspects of whole child development from PK and beyond, with this idea that adults have the power to transform student experiences. Okay, so everybody in that big circle has a role, and maybe we all can see where we situate, but we all have a role to play. And I'll end on this note. Thank you all, and transition. But before I do that, just wanted to say, we want to hear from you. So if you are a teacher or you work with teachers, we're still looking for more feedback. And I can share this link out later, but we have a survey where people can give us more info about what they want to see on AREA. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And we try to be witty, right, in our own little way. And so the other way, if you think of the multiple meaning of array in a mathematical sense, see all the component parts in the A? That's all us. So we have like a little multiple meaning in there. So thank you, Jennie, for that.